Jessica had always been that older sister who holds everything together for everyone. On that autumn Saturday in 2018, she had just left work, still with her mind full of the campaigns she needed to finish, when she received a message from Sarah, her younger sister, who since marrying Mark seemed increasingly distant at family gatherings. Jessica lived in a house that breathed life with Tom, her husband, and Ryan, their 7-year-old son who was the joy of the home. They had that good routine, made up of small simple moments, Sunday lunch, laughter in the kitchen, and Sofia, Sarah's daughter, who practically grew up there with them, running around the backyard and playing with Ryan as if they were true siblings. But that afternoon, there was a shadow no one wanted to face. Sarah almost never brought Mark to family gatherings, and when she did, he stayed in the corner, quiet, with a cold presence that made Jessica feel uncomfortable without exactly knowing why. The tension was palpable. Even though Sarah smiled and said everything was fine, Sofia, who was usually a lively and energetic little girl, was strangely silent, clutching her teddy bear too tightly, as if trying to protect herself from something invisible. Jessica realized something was wrong, but that day, what she least expected was that a tragedy would open the door to a truth no one there had the courage to speak about. Early that afternoon, Jessica's phone rang with an urgency that made her heart tighten. Immediately, it was Sarah on the other end of the line, her voice trembling and almost suffocated, unable to clearly say what was happening. Sofia had an accident, Jessica. They're at the hospital. I don't know what to do. The silence on the other end seemed to scream louder than words. Jessica felt the ground disappear beneath her, as if the world had stopped in that second. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, nor could she prepare her mind for the whirlwind of emotions that came with that news. All she knew was that she needed to run there, needed to be with Sarah and Sofia. But part of her just wanted to run away from the whole situation, from that painful reality that seemed about to explode. She dropped everything, the spreadsheets, the computer, the full calendar, and rushed out of the company, not even remembering if she had grabbed her purse or keys. Tom was already by her side, sensing the desperation, and grabbed her hand firmly, as if saying, "We'll get through this together." On the way, Jessica felt the weight of that afternoon draining her energy. The lack of concrete news from the hospital was like a silent torture, and the absence of Mark, who wasn't answering any calls, only increased the suspicion Jessica had felt for weeks. Something didn't fit. That accident, his silence, the strange tension Sarah never showed at family gatherings. It all seemed like a dark puzzle about to be revealed. No matter the cost, she just didn't yet know how deep and devastating what was coming would be. When Jessica arrived at the hospital, the smell of disinfectant seemed to mix with a heavy silence, one of those that sucks the air out and leaves your throat dry. She could barely see the 7-year-old girl lying there on the stretcher, fragile, with tubes and machines making strange noises around her. Sofia looked like an angel trapped in a small body, motionless, as if ripped from life by force. What cut Jessica's heart the most wasn't just seeing her niece like that, but Sarah's empty look, which seemed to carry a weight far beyond the accident. The white hospital walls had never seemed so cold, and the idea that the child who ran and played in their backyard was now there, fighting to breathe, was too surreal for her mind to process. The environment was heavy, doctors coming and going, confused family members, muffled whispers. Jessica noticed that even among the crowd, there was a silence that spoke too loudly. She noticed the expressions on the faces around her: fear, guilt, tension. Mark wasn't there, and no one could say where he was. Sarah avoided looking at anyone, seeming to want to hide behind the shadow she carried, and Ryan, holding his mother's hand tightly, had wide eyes, trying to understand what all this meant. It was as if that hospital room was the epicenter of an emotional earthquake no one had been prepared to face. And, in the middle of that chaos, Jessica felt the seed of determination grow inside her. She was going to find out what really happened, no matter the cost. While Sarah and Tom talked to the doctors, Ryan stayed by the stretcher, with a curious and worried look, something only a child can feel without fully understanding why. It was he who, shyly, caught Jessica's attention by pointing to Sofia's hand, which was half open, as if wanting to hold something. Jessica approached slowly, almost in slow motion, feeling her heart tighten at the possibility of finding yet another surprise on a day that had already been far from expected. And that's when she saw it, a small crumpled piece of paper hidden in the girl's palm, as if it were a secret Sofia had tried to hold onto with all her might. Jessica carefully took out the note and, with a trembling hand, read the words that would change everything. "Mommy, help me. Daddy hits Mommy. It hurts. I'm going to Andy's house." It was a simple confession, but carried a weight none of them had noticed until that moment. She felt the world spin around her sister's voice echoing in her mind, the time she tried to hide the truth to protect Sofia, and the fear the girl had lived through. The note, written with Sofia's crooked, childish handwriting, was more than a plea. It was a silent cry for help that revealed what was behind that tragic accident. Jessica knew from that moment on nothing would ever be the same, and that truth needed to be faced head-on, without fear. As the note's reading dropped like a bomb in the room, Jessica felt the urgency to look into her sister's eyes, searching for any sign of denial or explanation that might ease that weight. But what she found was a heavy silence, a broken look that carried a much darker story than anyone there could imagine. With a trembling voice and almost a whisper, Sarah began to break down. She told about Mark's abuse, which wasn't only physical, but also psychological. The nights of crying in the dark, the constant fear that kept her trapped in a cycle of silence and shame. The accident with Sofia, she revealed, was the explosion of that suffering. A desperate attempt by Mark to silence the daughter who threatened to tell the truth. Jessica felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and helplessness flood her body like an overwhelming wave. She tried to hold her sister, but she knew no words could erase the deep marks Sarah carried. Sarah confessed she had tried to hide everything, protecting Sofia from the worst, but the fear of Mark and lack of support left her too vulnerable to react. And there, in that cold room, the sisters understood that the battle beginning was not only for justice, but for the rebuilding of a life that violence had torn apart. Jessica promised herself that no one, never again, would tread that dark territory without being confronted. After that confession, Jessica knew she had to act quickly. She spent the night by her sister's side, holding her hand and offering all the support Sarah had never had before. Slowly, with a courage that seemed born from pain, Jessica convinced Sarah to seek official help, to file a complaint, to put an end to that nightmare. It wasn't easy. Fear was there, invisible, like a constant shadow. But the love and protection Jessica offered began to open space for hope. She herself contacted lawyers, support groups, and did everything she could so that Sarah and Sofia would feel safe. Even amid the chaos ahead, the whole family rallied around that decision. Tom promised to take care of Sarah and Sofia as if they were his own daughters, and Ryan, with his innocence, already considered Sofia a little sister. Every step taken to report Mark was an act of collective courage, a silent scream saying enough. Jessica felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as she waited for the day of the hearing, the moment when the truth would finally have to be heard by others. Outside that hospital room and the house that once seemed so safe, the tension was immense, but there was also a spark of strength beginning to ignite that family with the certainty that a better future was possible. When Mark was rested, everything seemed more real and, at the same time, frightening. It took time for it to sink in for everyone. Jessica felt a mix of relief and fear, as if security had returned, but the fight was just beginning. Seeing that man who had been a shadow over her sister's and niece's lives for so long being taken away by the police was a profound shock. Sarah, who until then seemed fragile, found his silent strength there, a new foundation that grew stronger day by day. For Jessica, that was not just a legal victory, but the first step toward rebuilding what violence had destroyed. Sofia began a long and difficult path to recovery. Between physical therapy sessions and many moments of uncertainty, Jessica's house, which had once been just a joyful home, became a refuge, full of toys scattered on the floor and shy smiles starting to reappear. Ryan and Sofia became inseparable partners, as if the pain had brought those little hearts even closer. Jessica and Sarah, now living under the same roof, began building a space where fear was replaced by trust and love. Life would never be the same again, but there was hope in the air, a new beginning that seemed possible, even with the scars left behind. In the first months after the incident, bringing together two families that had lived through so much trauma was a challenge no one could fully foresee. Jessica realized that, despite the love that already existed, a lot of patience and understanding was needed for Sarah and Sofia to truly feel at home. There were days when Sofia would retreat, staying quietly in a corner, scared of loud noises or sudden movements, and Sarah, in turn, still battled ghosts from the past that insisted on returning. Ryan, with his sweet and restless nature, played the role of protective brother, trying to cheer Sofia up with stories and games, but everyone had to learn to deal with the invisible marks that violence had left. Tom, who had always been a present father to Ryan, took on the role of father figure for Sofia as well, with a naturalness that surprised Jessica. He knew he couldn't replace anyone, but he dedicated himself to offering a safe and loving environment, a safe harbor Sofia had never had before. Gradually, the house was transformed into a true home, where every corner carried stories of overcoming and rebuilding. The bond among them grew stronger, not only because of blood ties, but because of the daily choice to love, care for, and protect one another. It was a family rising from the ashes, learning to live and love in a new way. Over time, Jessica and Sarah understood that to take care of Sofia and Ryan, they also needed to look after themselves. The pain and trauma didn't disappear overnight, and carrying the weight of the violence they had suffered required much more than physical strength. It needed emotional support, listening, and care. They started attending support groups, going to therapy, and sharing their fears and anxieties with people who truly understood what they were living through. It was a slow and sometimes painful process, but created a safe space for both to gradually breathe and reconnect. The journey of healing involved accepting that not everything was under control, and that asking for help was not a sign of weakness but of courage. The love in that house that now gathered siblings, nieces and nephews, fathers and mothers in different forms, was the force that kept everything standing. More than hugs, it was the attentive listening, the gaze that saw beyond words, the silence that said, "I'm here." Ryan, even so young, already understood the importance of this and made a point of being present, trying to be the brother Sofia needed. Jessica, becoming Sofia's mother with an open heart, felt that this new family arrangement was not just a refuge from the past but the start of a different story, where hope and protection would always be a priority. And little by little, fear gave way to trust and the certainty that together they could overcome anything. As the months passed, Jessica's house stopped being just the family's address and became a true home, a place where fear had no space, where every corner carried stories of overcoming and hope. The walls that once seemed silent now echoed timid laughter, honest conversations, and even small quarrels typical of those discovering and reconnecting themselves. Sofia gradually found her place, her voice, not only as the niece who had suffered, but as the girl full of dreams and a will to live she had always been. Jessica, Sarah, and Tom worked together so this home would be a refuge for all, a safe space where love was the foundation. Ryan, who from the beginning had accepted Sofia as his sister, created such a strong bond with her that sometimes it seemed they even shared thoughts. He became the natural protector of the girl, the one who, with his games and quiet care, helped rebuild the childhood Sofia nearly lost. This sibling relationship transformed not only Sofia's life, but Ryan's as well, who learned early the value of empathy, patience, and courage in that home. It didn't matter where they came from, but where they were going together, and the path was full of love, even if the journey had been marked by pain. Jessica, looking at the family gathered in the living room, felt a complex mix of emotions. So much pain, fear, and silence gave way to a space full of love and trust, something she never imagined possible after all they had been through. She knew the journey was far from over, that deep scars would take time to disappear, but she also recognized the strength those experiences had brought. At that moment, she understood that true healing is not about forgetting the past, but learning to live with it, using every step to build a different future, where no one would ever have to feel fear inside their home again. And it was with that certainty that Jessica made a decision that would change everything forever. She, Sarah, Sofia, Tom, and Ryan would start a new life, far from any shadow Mark might leave behind. A fresh start based on the courage to face what was coming, on the union that kept them standing, and on the hope that love can always transform even the hardest stories. That day, which began marked by tragedy, ended with the silent promise that together they would move forward, protecting each other and never again allowing silence to be stronger than the truth.